Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, 2026. Hey, let's do a couple of birth dates. Enough of that. I'm starting to question the sincerity of it all. Born on this date in 1961, NASCAR legend Davey Allison of Hollywood, Florida, who moved with his family to Hueytown at a young age and followed Dad Bobby Allison and Uncle Donnie Allison into racing. In 1919, Baseball Hall of Famer Monty Irvin of Haleburg. Today, we have a Goat Hill Lightning Round, a response from the developer of that giant Baldwin County proposed solar farm, and maybe, just maybe, a little tongue-in-cheek suggestion that the annual State of the Union spectacle is perhaps somewhat kinda predictable. My name's Ike Morgan. Hey, and we're down in Alabama.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Let's start off with an Alabama legislative session lightning round. Here are some recent developments from Goat Hill. The Alabama House of Representatives overwhelmingly gave final approval to a bill that would create 5-year teaching certificates for military veterans who don't have a bachelor's degree but have at least 60 hours of college credit with at least a 2.5 GPA. That now goes to the governor's desk. The state house again passed a bill that would require state and local entities and their employees to refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America in support of President Trump's executive order. Now, that would include references on maps, documents, websites, educational materials, etc., unless it were to impose an operational or financial burden. The bill moves to the Senate, where a similar one died last year. A Senate committee approved a bill that requires Huntsville and Montgomery to employ at least 2 police officers for every 1,000 residents as of the 2020 census, or face possible state intervention. And a House committee approved a bill that would make it a felony to intentionally disrupt a church service. Walker County Republican and bill sponsor Gregory Barnes said the bill was not necessarily inspired by the Don Lemon arrest at a Minnesota church. House Republicans passed the Second Amendment sales tax holiday, which would suspend the state sales tax on firearms and ammunition for a few days in August. Democrats argue that's a bad decision when the state still collects sales tax on food. And one last item. The Senate passed a bill that would make running from the law a felony punishable by up to 5 years in jail. The developer of a behemoth proposed solar farm in the unincorporated Baldwin County town of Stockton has responded to public outcry and defended the project and its expected environmental impact, reports AL.com's Margaret Cates. Now remember, this project would sit on 4,500 acres of what's now timberland. 2 solar farms there would power a Montgomery data center for Meta, which is the company that owns Facebook. Adding to the concern over loss of habitat is that local creeks flow into the Tensas River and the area of so much biodiversity that it's become known as America's Amazon. Silicon Ranch is the company that's developing the solar farm. CEO Reagan Farr said Silicon Ranch is an environmental company that brings responsible use into the equation. Farr said 2,000 of the acres are being developed for the solar array, and the other 2,500, including all the wetlands on the property, will be conserved. He also said it's not a case of paving over the land, but trying to integrate the array with native plants and even a flock of sheep, the literal kind. Now, I know some of y'all are wondering, so I'll go ahead and make this clear. Well, I don't see anything here anyway about whether they'll lease deer stands between rows of solar panels. So don't count on that. Now, while the power will be used to offset the needs of Meta, Silicon Ranch does not have a relationship with that company. Silicon Ranch will operate the project and sell the energy to Alabama Power, which will then provide it to the data center. Financially strapped Jackson Hospital in Montgomery filed Chapter 11 a few weeks back. On Tuesday, Governor Kay Ivey announced a $40 million bond issue for the 80-year-old facility, reports AL.com's Mike Kaysen. The governor had met with a bond commission that was created by Alabama Constitution Amendment 666 that was approved by voters back in 2000. I'm not sure why the state didn't skip over 666 and just call it 667. The way some buildings go from floor 12 to 14. I guess confidence. Said Ivey, quote, losing a hospital in one of our large metropolitan areas would be devastating not just for the Montgomery community, but for the many residents in the surrounding counties it serves. Well, sometimes we have several Alabama connections at the State of the Union speeches. Not so much last night, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on it. But if you didn't watch President Trump's State of the Union address, I'll give you the Cliff's Notes really quick. First, it was longer than the Paris Olympics. Not really, but it was still a record-length State of the Union speech at 108 minutes. Interesting point that the 9 longest State of the Union speeches came from either Trump or Bill Clinton. So there you go. Critics take cheap shots at President Trump for liking long speeches, making exaggerated comparisons to the marathon speeches of dictators such as Hugo Chavez or Fidel Castro, who went on a whole lot longer than Trump. But there's a reason dictators talk for a long time, because nobody's allowed to leave. See, now that doesn't apply to Trump, of course. He's not a dictator, and people are free to get up and walk out anytime they want to. Indeed, about half the Democrats didn't even show up on Tuesday night. The joke's on them, though, because you know Trump will count them in his crowd size estimates. And yeah, there were some liberties taken by the president with economic data. Inflation is higher than he claimed, and gas prices higher. Still, his off-the-top-of-his-head statistical analysis inspired Republicans, who have one more Trump primary endorsement to go, by the way, to cheer heartily at every misplaced decimal point and every line, every period, while Democrats practiced making their Veruca Salt faces. I've had teenage daughters who eye roll less than some congressional Democrats. And speaking of Democrats, you'd better sit down for this. They didn't like Trump's performance. Maybe it was because he called them crazy during his speech. I don't know. But as a matter of fact, they hated it so much that they apparently had the opposition responder, Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger, actually be critical of the president on every single bullet point. I know. And she gave her response from the chambers of the House of Burgesses in Virginia, most likely because her kitchen isn't nearly as clean as Senator Katie Britt's, which was the site of the 24 State of the Union response. Ultimately, CNN reported last night on TV that Trump's speech did cause a bump among viewers' positive expectations. So, the Cliff's Notes of the State of the Union address in 2026 are pretty much the same as the Cliff's Notes of most State of the Union addresses, with perhaps a continued downward trend in moments of attempted bipartisanship on either side. But we always have next year to look forward to. Thank y'all so much for listening to us. We'll be back here again in the morning. Until then, y'all come see us anytime you can on the internet at al.com.